I was working at Westtown CDC on the middle west side of Cleveland, doing community development there. And I saw the job posting, and it was really a time when people were talking about regionalism. So I looked at the First Suburbs as being regional before regionalism was cool, before everybody started doing it, and to be able to have greater impact. And so, in terms of affecting change on a greater level, working in 15 communities looked like it would be a challenge, but also one that we could leave a footprint and make a difference in people's lives. It was a one-person shop. It was a startup. You had people on the board that, probably weren't involved in startups before other than their own organizations. And so they were probably entrepreneurs. So trying to bring that entrepreneurial spirit, but didn't know the bounds of being able to work within municipal governments. And so I think that that was a lot different. And the expectations of each city were different in terms of some thought that they were getting 1/15 or 1/14 of an economic development director because they didn't have the capacity on staff, or they thought that they were getting a full-time economic development director by paying dues to the First Suburbs Development Council and the First Suburbs Consortium. And so, it was really trying to manage those expectations right off the bat, and coming into a new organization and, not having staff, which was quite different, but then being able to bring some on and being at Cleveland Heights and, the gracious hosts that they were in terms of having me on the second floor there. And then trying to make things happen equitable across those 14 or 15 communities and being board driven. And so either, looking at the West End development in Lakewood or looking at the storefront renovation programs that we were looking at, or the two-family conversion, which I'm sure we'll get into the challenges and successes a little bit later on. But then you had other people that were helping driving it, Bob Jaquay from the Gun Foundation, Jay Talbot from the Cleveland Foundation, Tom Byer. All these people really wanted the First Suburbs to be as successful as possible. And then you had Ken Motlak, the originator, or at least the person that so many people were codependent on the success of First Suburbs on his shoulders. And so it seemed like a small group, but they had so much reach. And again, expectations that, if we could have been a 4 to 5 person shop, I think that we probably would have had a lot more longevity and sustainability as a CDC in terms of moving forward. But, there needed to be a learning process. And, the First Suburbs Development Council was definitely, I think, a learning process to many communities, because everybody always looked at the Cleveland CDC community and said, oh, we need to have something just like that, but not having the same financial or the funding structure where each CDC could get up to $400,000 from their city council person. That wasn't the case in the inner ring suburbs, in the first ring suburbs, and the First Suburbs itself. So lots of challenges, but welcoming challenges. And I think the 7-person board, again, of non-municipal types, really wanted to take that on and wanted to move it to be successful. Being able to collaborate, I mean, it was just a great microcosm of collaboration. And so one of the things that I believe, hit out of the park right away was the collaboration with the American Institute of Architects, the AIA, and Judd Klein, bringing local architects to the forefront so that people who are doing storefront renovations in the inner ring suburbs could really have access to architects to give them some input on what they were doing. And I think that that was something that that was really good coming out of that. Being able to look at as a conduit of development, and the West End and Lakewood, depending on what side you were on, depended on how you looked at it. But what it showed is that there could be involvement of a development council in terms of development happening in working with city councils and working with administrations to make that happen. And so that was easy. And having people on the consortium opening those doors to the administration and to city council made it easier to be able to do that. I think the culmination was really in 2005 when there was a meeting at the county commissioners, and it was really talking about the need to expedite foreclosure processes on vacant housing. And you know, the county commissioners meeting was packed with mayors from almost every one of our communities, whether that was Mayor Fudge, who's now Secretary of HUD, to Mike Summers, to everybody who was in there, and saying, look, we want to expedite vacant foreclosures, and we want to make sure that we still take care of the residents who are going through foreclosure. And I think that what that showed is that everybody was in it together, and everybody was suffering the same, and everybody was going to celebrate those successes the same. And so those kind of collaborations, and I talk about, you know, regionalism before regionalism was cool, but truly ahead of the curve in terms of working together in trying to move things forward. Now, at times it was a zero-sum game in terms of development. I remember when I first came on, there was an economic development person talking about, you know, one of their key commercial players in their city, saying that they were just about to sign a long-term contract, but then talking to another economic development person who said, oh, by the way, we're bringing in this other commercial property from a quote-unquote competing community. And so you still had those kind of things, because you still have to, you know, look at your own home rule kind of perspective. But it really, the First Suburbs Development Council really showed that collaboration could happen on a large footprint. And so I was very excited about that, and being able to put things in there that everybody could collaborate on as opposed to compete on.
That's great. What do you remember most about this time?
What do I remember most, other than the drive from the west side to the east side and getting lost numerous times going to lunch, which was just down the road? You know, it was a time when looking at different housing models, and you know, we talk about the two-family conversion and the bungalow conversion, and those were some trying times. I mean, there was some success in terms of bringing out those designs, and then there was some, you know, long-term PTSD and putting them into place. But I think what it showed, and again, ahead of the curve in terms of looking at innovative models of home ownership and home design, to look at built-out communities and saying, how do we offer alternatives to our communities? And so, you know, whether that was Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, University Heights, South Euclid, and across the footprint, but those were the communities that were wanting to step up and say, hey, we're ready to look at something different. And so that whole thing, though it was trying at times, it really, it showed that it wasn't the staid, entering communities that people believed them to be, because out of necessity, whether that was the tax base or out of necessity to change the dynamic of the communities, meaning, you know, bringing in more families, solidifying the school systems, et cetera. Again, an exciting time. You know, 2002 to 2000, I was there 2002 to 2005. It was exciting to be there, and I'm glad that I'm there. I was there. I was able to make, to have relationships with numerous people that I've kept up to this day.
So you're in a different role now, and you're sitting in, at times, a different town as you're living in that different role as the executive director of National Neighbor Works Association. How does the housing climate and the needs in Northeast Ohio today compare to other regions across the country?
Yeah, you know what, I think that, you know, the inequities of our communities now are the same inequities of communities across the country. There seems to be a boom in housing in terms of selling. It's a seller's market across the country. But I think that the Midwest and the industrial areas have not had the comeback that you've seen on the coast in terms of housing, but also in terms of the affordability in the quality of housing. And so I think that when I look at Northeast Ohio and the housing stock here, the value is incredible. You know, when I think of a 2,200 square foot home in South Euclid that is beautiful and is ready to move in, and you think of that same home in Connecticut or, you know, Phoenix or something along those lines, it's not that the cost of living is 1.5 times or 2 times. That housing price is 3 to 4 times, if not more, than Northeast Ohio. So I think that we're poised, especially after the pandemic, and showing that there is production of people from working anywhere, that this area is ripe to be able to attract another working middle class. I think it's different than what Richard Florida, you know, when we were around, Richard Florida was the guy. You know, everybody needs to go after the creative class. And he'll even say that he was wrong, and he was wrong. And there are art communities and there's places that the creative class is going to be, but that's not a one size fits all for everyone. But in terms of being able to work remotely, I think that Northeast Ohio is poised well. And then also being able to have the mayor of Lawrenceville Heights now be the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And, you know, being able to bring those experiences of affordable housing in Lawrenceville Heights, in the inner ring suburbs, in the first suburbs, and sitting in that county commissioners meeting, wanting to talk about vacant properties and people who shouldn't be leaving to make vacant properties, and now being in charge of the largest affordable housing organization is just incredible. And I think that bears well for us in Northeast Ohio, but then also those across the country. The challenges aren't much different, but the successes aren't much different either. You know, it's much different than Silicon Valley. You know, I don't think that we're going to have too much of those kind of developments. We'll have an Amazon warehouse, but you know, are we going to have a big egg headquarters kind of thing drawing people? I think at times that's not a good thing, especially for what we're trying to make our communities and our school systems and the places that we work and play, as they are in Northeast Ohio, solid for people here.
As you look forward, Lou, what do you see as opportunities for not only Northeast Ohio, but also the First Suburbs organization going forward?
You know what, the First Suburbs, I see, you know, more and more a movement to bring new thinking in. And I think that that's good. And that's not saying that the tenured thinking isn't bad. I mean, there are still some stalwarts of community development in our communities to be able to do that. But the future, I believe, is looking at innovation. I think the future is in terms of looking at new ideas and looking at you know, at different zoning things and different regulations and how to make it easier to build, but have a high standard of building. You know, construction and construction costs, and we're seeing that, you know, lumber has gone down. You know, lumber prices have gone down 3 days in a row. It's still outrageous to be able to build a house, to use any kind of lumber and things along those lines. But I think that you see communities again coming together to saying, how do we address this? And you know, regionalism at times comes and goes. And so what's the future for the First Suburbs? The future of the First Suburbs is the First Suburbs. And that's coming back together and working towards a single goal of economic and community development, and trying to see, you know, how to make sure everyone's taken care of. But when I say taken care of, it's that they're looking to provide a value add in terms of living in the first suburbs. There's discussions now about middle neighborhoods and, you know, all this other kind of stuff. The first suburbs will be there after whatever the new thing. They were there after the creative class. They were there, you know, along the way. You finally have, you know, some regional organizations that are looking at sprawl seriously and trying to combat that. And I think that that's important. I think that that's, you know, when you talk about future, it's really, you know, sprawl continues, and how do we turn that spigot off? And I think that we're moving in the right direction there. And that's not trapping people by any means. People can still move to wherever they would like. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be at the cost of our communities.
Anything else that you can think of that you wanted to touch on that you didn't, or?
You know what, when I think back on my time at First Suburbs, and, you know, it's really the people. And if I could mention all those people, I mean, Mayor Rothschild, I mean, what a spark plug, right? I mean, you know, in just Mayor Russ, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but it was those people, it was the economic development people, you know, the Vince Adamas, Sally Martin, Kamala, you know, Marty DeVito, Noreen. It was really working with Brad Sellers. I mean, the tallest economic development director I've ever met in my life. Now, the tallest mayor I've ever met in my life. I don't know where he gets his suits made, but that tailor has to be really happy. But it was really those kind of relationship building that will carry through the First Suburbs, because there's new relations to be had. And to move ahead, people should take advantage of those relationships in a good way. And, you know, again, I think of the cornerstones. I think of Kathleen, I think of Ken, and I think of you. And, you know, to move the First Suburbs, we need to have that same kind of thinking, but with some innovative design build, regs, zoning, that kind of thing, wrapped around great people like you guys.